I heard his laugh before I even reached the door. It was the same laugh I had fallen in love with 4 years ago, warm, easy, the kind that made everything feel okay. But standing outside Vanessa Blake's apartment building in Chicago that cold Thursday night, for months pregnant and shaking, that laugh felt like a knife turning in my chest. My name is Emily Carter. I was 31 years old, a quiet woman who believed in loyalty the way other people believed in religion. I had trusted my husband, Adrian Carter, with every piece of myself, my time, my savings, my future, and the baby growing inside me. I pressed my hand against my stomach. I had followed him here because his assistant, Marcus, had called me by mistake. He meant to call Adrian. Instead, I heard 3 seconds of laughter, a woman's voice, and an address repeated twice before the line went dead. 3 seconds. That was all it took to unravel for years. I walked into the hallway. The elevator was already open, like it had been waiting for me. I stepped inside, pressed the number Marcus had said, and rode up in silence. I told myself I was wrong. I told myself there was an explanation. I was not wrong. There was no explanation. The apartment door was slightly open. I could see them through the gap. Adrian standing near the window, laughing at something Vanessa had just said. She was wearing his gray shirt, the one I had bought him for his birthday last year. She leaned against the wall like a woman who had already won something. I stood there for one long moment, not breathing. Then I pushed the door all the way open. Adrian turned. His smile disappeared so fast it was like watching a light switch off. Vanessa didn't even flinch. She looked at me with her arms crossed, then tilted her head slowly, the way a person does when they are deciding how much damage they are willing to do. Emily, Adrian said. Just my name. Nothing else. No apology. No panic. Just my name, flat and careful, like I was a problem he was calculating how to manage. I looked at Vanessa. I looked at the shirt. I looked at the glass of wine on the table that had lipstick on the rim. How long? I asked. Adrian rubbed the back of his neck. That gesture I knew so well. He did it whenever he was caught and needed time to build a lie. This is not what it looks like, he said. It was exactly what it looked like. I asked him again. How long? Adrian finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was not guilt. It was irritating. The kind a person shows when they are tired of pretending. Vanessa is the woman I should have married, he said quietly. I care about her in a way. I stopped caring about you a long time ago. The words hit me like cold water. You can stay home, he continued. You can be the good wife on paper. But this is real. I turned to leave. My legs were already moving toward the door. Vanessa stepped forward. She looked at my stomach with something almost like a smile. A baby doesn't make a man love you, Emily, she said. It just makes him feel trapped. Adrian grabbed my arm as I reached the doorway. We're not done, he said. Let go of me, I told him. He didn't. I pulled harder. He pushed me back. My heel caught the edge of the rug and I fell, hard, backward into the doorframe, then down onto the floor. The last thing I saw clearly was Adrian standing over me, not rushing to help, just staring in panic, not for me, but for himself. Then everything went dark. I woke up to voices and the sharp smell of a hospital. I could not see anything, just black, complete, total black. I called Adrian's name. A nurse answered instead. She told me I had hit my head badly in the fall. She spoke in a gentle, careful tone that told me before the doctors did that something was very wrong. They ran tests. They spoke in low voices outside my door. By the time the doctor came in to explain, I had already guessed. The impact caused trauma to your optic nerve, he said. Your vision may be affected long-term. We will know more in the coming days. May be affected. I lay there in the dark and pressed both hands flat on the bed. I breathed in, breathed out. My baby, I said. Your pregnancy is stable, the nurse said quickly. We are monitoring closely. The baby is okay. I did not cry. Not then. I was too stunned to cry. I asked for Adrian. The nurse told me he had signed the intake forms and left, saying he had urgent business. Urgent business. I turned my face toward the wall I could not see and stayed very, very still. Adrian came the next day. I heard his footsteps before he spoke. Quick, impatient, the walk of a man who had somewhere else to be. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "I can't see, Adrian. The doctors said it might be temporary. It might not be." A pause. The sound of him shifting in his chair. "Look, Emily, let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. You lost your balance. It was an accident." I turned toward his voice. "You pushed me." "That is not what happened," he said, his tone going cold. "And I need you not to say things like that to the nurses or to anyone. Do you understand me? I cannot have that kind of story circling." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I am sorry." Not, "I am scared for you." Just, "Do not embarrass me." I said nothing. He told me he would be back the next evening. He never came. A nurse told me 2 days later, quietly, almost apologetically, that she had seen him leaving the hospital with a woman in a red coat. That night, I lay awake and listened to the sounds of the ward, machines beeping, distant voices, someone crying down the hall. And I made a decision. I would not beg. I would not break. I would become very quiet, and I would wait. On the 5th day, I overheard Adrian on the phone outside my room. He did not know the door was open. "If she stays blind," he said, "she'll never be able to fight me." I did not move. I did not make a sound. I memorized those words the way you memorize something you will need later, sharp and exact. That same afternoon, an old university friend named Nathan Brooks walked into my room. I recognized his voice immediately. Low, steady, unhurried. Nathan had been in my economics class 10 years ago. We had lost touch after graduation, but mutual friends must have reached him. "Emily," he said. I turned toward the sound. "I heard what happened," he said. "I came." 3 words. No fanfare. No performance. Just presence. Adrian came in minutes later and saw Nathan sitting beside my bed. His whole energy shifted. "Why is he here?" Adrian asked sharply. "Because someone should be," Nathan said. Adrian left without another word. Nathan stayed the full afternoon. He did not ask me questions I did not want to answer. He simply sat there, reading quietly, keeping me company in the dark. Before he left, he asked me one question. "Do you want me to help you disappear?" I didn't answer. Not yet. For 2 more weeks, I said nothing. I still wanted to believe Adrian might feel something real, shame, guilt, fear for me. I watched for it each time he visited, which grew less and less frequent. What I got instead were instructions. He told me not to speak to the hospital's social worker. He told me not to call his mother. He told me to rest, recover, and stay quiet. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Then the discharge papers arrived. He had arranged them without telling me. No discussion, no plan for where I would go or how I would manage. Just a date and a form with a signature already on it, and a note that said I should go home and rest. Home. The house that had slowly stopped feeling like mine. I held the papers in my hands and ran my fingertips over his signature. Then I called Nathan. "Yes," I said when he picked up. "I want to disappear." Nathan moved fast. He had already spoken to a woman named Rebecca Hayes, a sharp, careful attorney who had once worked in financial crime. She began collecting things quietly. Medical records, security camera requests from Vanessa's building, phone logs, financial documents Adrian had signed in my name. Adrian thought he was sending me away to recover in silence. He had no idea he was giving me time to build. Nathan arranged a private medical transfer to London under the condition of specialist treatment. No announcements. No drama. Just paperwork, a car, and a quiet flight. Before we left Chicago, I asked Nathan to drive me past our house one last time. He didn't ask why. He just drove. We stopped at the end of the street. I could not see the house, but I rolled the window down and listened. Music was playing inside. I could hear voices, Vanessa's laugh, other guests, the sound of glasses clinking. Adrian was hosting a party. In our home. With our things. While I sat in a car, blind and pregnant, 48 hours after leaving a hospital bed, I rolled the window back up. "Let him enjoy the house," I said. "For now." Nathan didn't say anything. He drove. On the plane, my phone rang. It was Rebecca. The apartment building had cameras, she said. We found the footage. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes, not that it made any difference now. But for the first time since falling, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace exactly. More like purpose. London was cold and gray when we arrived, but the medical facility Nathan had chosen was warm and quiet. He had arranged everything: a team of neurological specialists, a rehabilitation coordinator, a therapist, and a legal advisor who had worked on international asset cases for 15 years. The first weeks were the hardest of my life. Learning to eat alone without knocking things over. Learning to walk through a room without flinching at furniture I could not see. Learning to sleep without nightmares of the fall, of Adrian's face standing over me, of Vanessa's laugh echoing off white walls. Nathan refused to pity me. That was the thing I was most grateful for. He did not speak to me like I was broken. He spoke to me like I was someone who had work to do. You still think faster than most people I know, he said one morning. That hasn't changed. He brought in audio technology trainers. Business software adapted for visually impaired users. A financial consultant who taught me how to read account structures through verbal reporting. Slowly, I began to change. Not back into who I was before. Into someone sharper. Someone who had been forced to listen more carefully to the world because she could no longer simply look at it. I began recording voice notes every evening, everything Adrian had done, every date I could remember, every conversation I had heard. My memory became my evidence. One night, Nathan played me the audio from the security camera outside Vanessa's building. The footage covered the hallway near the elevator. Rebecca had worked for 3 weeks to obtain it legally. I sat very still as the audio played. I heard myself arriving. I heard the door opening. I heard raised voices, mine, then Adrian's, then Vanessa's sharp, bright laugh before any of the arguing even started. Then I heard Adrian's voice, low and hard. Nobody will believe her. I heard the scuffle, the fall. A single terrible sound that I knew was me hitting the floor. Then silence. Then Vanessa's voice, suddenly tearful. Oh my God, call someone. The performance made my skin crawl. I sat quietly until the audio ended. Don't release anything yet, I told Rebecca when she called that evening. I want him to build his throne. I want him to feel safe. I want him to make every move he is planning to make. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. How long? Until he forges my name, I said. She paused again. How did you know he would do that? Because he already thinks I can't fight him, I said. Men like Adrian always reach too far when they think no one is watching. Back in Chicago, Adrian wasted no time. He moved Vanessa fully into the house within 6 weeks of my departure. He introduced her at events as his partner. He told colleagues I was overseas because I was emotionally fragile and unable to handle ordinary life. Vanessa wanted more. Rebecca's contacts inside Chicago's social circles reported regularly. Vanessa was pushing Adrian to file for divorce before the baby arrived, so she could secure her position as his official partner. Adrian hesitated, and not for sentimental reasons. Before our marriage, I had invested a significant portion of my savings into 2 of his early property developments. Those investments had matured quietly. I now held shares in companies Adrian needed to keep moving. Vanessa told him a blind woman living abroad could not manage business interests. Act fast, she said, before I found my footing. Adrian began forging my signature. He used it on 3 separate financial documents over the following 2 months, each one designed to move my shares into a holding company he controlled. What he did not know was that the holding company had a second owner, Vanessa. Rebecca traced it within a week. She called me with the news. He had not just stolen from me. He had stolen for her. My daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in early spring. The delivery was long and difficult, and I was terrified in a way I had never been before, not of the pain, but of meeting someone I could not fully see. When she cried for the first time, I broke open. It was not sadness. It was something bigger than sadness, relief and grief and wonder all tangled together, pouring out of me at once. The nurse placed her in my arms and guided my hands. I felt her face with my fingertips, her tiny nose, her soft cheeks, the warmth of her forehead against my chin. I named her Grace, because in the middle of the worst season of my life, she had arrived and kept surviving alongside me. That felt like grace. Not luck. Not a coincidence. Something steadier than both. Nathan was outside the room all night. When the nurse told me later, I had to turn away for a moment. Adrian was informed through Rebecca. His response came as a legal letter requesting a DNA test, claiming I may have been unfaithful. He called my daughter, his own daughter, a potential trap. That letter was added to the file. Nathan sat beside me that evening while I held Grace and said quietly, "One day she will know her mother didn't break. She rebuilt." I pressed my face against my daughter's hair and held on. 13 Vanessa began unraveling Adrian from the inside. She had expensive taste and no patience. Designer clothes, private trips, memberships to clubs Adrian could not comfortably afford. She moved money through accounts he barely monitored, treating his credit lines like her personal budget. Adrian thought he was managing her. He was not. He was funding her, and she was quietly preparing her own exit strategy in case things fell apart. She started pushing harder about the divorce. She told Adrian that if he did not legally end the marriage before Grace's first birthday, she would reconsider their future. Adrian filed. The papers reached Rebecca in London on a Wednesday afternoon. She read the claims aloud to me over the phone. Adrian alleged I had abandoned the marriage, left the country without his knowledge or consent, and denied him access to his child. He requested full control of all marital assets and legal costs. I sat and listened to every word. When Rebecca finished, she waited. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Good." "Good," she repeated. "He just handed me the courtroom," I said. "He filed first, which means I get to respond. And everything we have goes into that response." For the first time in months, I smiled properly. The divorce filing was the door I had been waiting for him to open. My doctors had been cautiously optimistic about a new procedure for weeks. They had been careful not to promise too much, knowing how much it would hurt if it failed. The procedure took 3 hours. Recovery was slow and uncomfortable. For days afterward, I could not tell whether anything had changed. Then one morning I woke up, and the room was no longer completely black. There were shapes, light and shadow, blurred edges where the walls met the ceiling. The first face I saw clearly enough to recognize was Grace's. She was lying beside me on the bed, eyes open, watching me the way babies do, like you are the most interesting thing that exists. Soft, round, completely trusting. I touched her cheek with one finger. She grabbed it. I could see it, blurred and imperfect and not the way my sight used to be, but I could see my daughter holding my finger, and I wept in a way I had not allowed myself to weep since the night I fell. Nathan gave me a week. Then he came to my room one morning with his laptop and said, "Are you ready to talk about what comes next?" I wiped my face. I sat up. "Tell me what we have," I said. He opened the file. Nathan introduced me to a group of international investors connected to Adrian's biggest current project, a luxury residential development in downtown Chicago called the Harlow Tower. Adrian had been presenting Harlow Tower as the centerpiece of his company's future. He had pitched it to investors across 4 countries, promising returns built on solid financial foundations. The foundations were not solid. Nathan's team had spent months quietly mapping the project's finances. What they found was not just sloppy accounting. It was deliberate misrepresentation, inflated property valuations, investor funds moved into accounts they were never told about, debt hidden behind holding companies with untraceable names. Adrian was not just a cheating husband anymore. He was a man with a serious financial crime problem. And Nathan's company owned a significant portion of the debt Adrian was desperately trying to refinance. "He needs our approval to move forward with Harlow Tower," Nathan said. "Without it, the whole project collapses." I let that sit for a moment. "And who does he think owns that debt?" I asked. "A private equity group called Marlowe Holdings," Nathan said. I nodded slowly. "And who actually owns Marlowe Holdings?" Nathan looked at me carefully. "Right now? You do." I closed the laptop. "Then let's build a strategy," I said. Nathan told me something the night before I returned to Chicago. We were sitting in the small courtyard of the London facility, Grace asleep in the room above us. The air was cool, and the city was quiet. He said he had admired me since university, not because of how I looked, but because I thought differently from everyone around me. He remembered a class debate where I had argued a position no one else was willing to take and defended it without raising my voice, and he had never forgotten it. He said he would not use my situation to make claims on my heart. He was there because he chose to be without conditions. I listened. Then I said, I know, and it matters more than you realize. We did not make promises, but something settled between us that night. A quiet understanding built on months of real things. Real fear, real work, real trust earned one careful decision at a time. In the morning, we flew home. When I walked through Chicago's arrivals terminal, I wore dark glasses, carried Grace with one arm, and held a cane with the other. Nathan walked beside me, not in front. Adrian saw me near the exit. He stopped completely. He stared like he was seeing something he had not prepared for. I walked past him without slowing. Save your words for the court, I said. Adrian tried to take control of the narrative the moment he knew I was back. He called reporters he knew and fed them the version of events he had been rehearsing for months. He painted me as a woman who had abandoned her husband, run off with a billionaire, and was now returning to drain him financially. Some blogs ran the story, without checking a single fact. Nathan offered to issue a public statement on my behalf. I told him no. I had spent 2 years being spoken to, by Adrian, by Vanessa, by the story he had built around me while I was too far away to argue. I was done letting other people carry my voice. I recorded a statement myself. No lawyers in the room, no scripted language. Just me, speaking plainly about what had happened and what I had survived. I posted it quietly on a small platform. By the following morning it had been shared 40,000 times. Women wrote to Rebecca's office asking how they could access similar legal support. Former employees of Adrian's company began reaching out, saying they had their own concerns about his business practices. One woman said he had threatened her job when she questioned missing funds. Another said she had signed documents she later realized gave him access to her project shares. Emily's case was no longer just a divorce. It was becoming something larger. The divorce hearing opened on a gray Monday morning. Adrian arrived with his attorney, a confident man named Philip Crawley, who had a reputation for winning ugly. Philip opened by describing me as unstable, manipulative, and financially motivated. He told the judge I had fled the country with another man and deliberately kept Adrian from his child. He spoke for 20 minutes without once mentioning the fall. When it was Rebecca's turn, she stood and said she would like to begin with a medical report. She laid out the hospital records from the night I was admitted, the nature of my injuries, the assessment of the trauma, and the timeline of Adrian's visits to the hospital, which were 3 and 11 days. Then she presented the discharge papers he had filed without consulting me. Then she requested that the court hear the audio from Vanessa's building security system. The room went very still when Adrian's voice came through the speaker. Nobody will believe her. Adrian's expression collapsed slowly, layer by layer, like something structural giving way. Philip Crawley touched his client's arm. Adrian shook him off. Rebecca then called Vanessa Blake as a witness. Vanessa looked at Adrian once before she sat down. The look said everything about how little loyalty remained between them. Vanessa lied first. She told the court that I had arrived at her apartment in a rage, that I had pushed past Adrian, and that he had simply tried to stop me from hurting myself. She was calm, practiced. Then Rebecca played additional audio from the hallway camera, the section recorded before I arrived. Vanessa's voice, sharp and laughing, talking to Adrian about how he would handle me if I ever found out. The courtroom went completely quiet. Vanessa's composure cracked. Just slightly, but enough. Then Rebecca played the section where Vanessa said, directly and clearly, that a baby would not force a man to love a woman. Followed by the sound of the fall. Followed by Adrian's voice. Nobody will believe her. In the back row, I could hear Adrian's father, Richard Carter, shift in his seat. Rebecca had told me he was there. I had not asked him to come. He had come on his own. Vanessa turned against Adrian in real time. She told the court he had assured her I was unstable. that he had told her to say, "I fell by myself," that he had organized everything, including the narrative. Adrian stared at her with an expression I could not fully see, but could feel across the room. Rebecca stood again. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "we also have evidence of forged financial documents." Rebecca presented the forged documents one by one. A handwriting analyst confirmed that 3 signatures bearing my name did not match my actual signature pattern. Bank records showed the money trail from my shares into the shell company Adrian had created, and from there into an account registered to Vanessa Blake. Adrian's attorney tried to argue the transfers were authorized verbally. Rebecca produced written communication between Adrian and his accountant, discussing how to move the assets without triggering a notification to me. Philip Crawley looked at his notes for a long time and said nothing. Vanessa, still on the stand, said she had not known the full source of the money. She claimed Adrian had told her it was a business restructure. Adrian said Vanessa had pressured him into it. They dismantled each other piece by piece, right there in the open court, while I sat and waited. The judge ordered an immediate review of all of Adrian's business accounts and expanded the inquiry beyond the divorce into potential criminal fraud. I did not look satisfied. I kept my face completely still, because the next piece was the one that would cost him the most. Rebecca caught my eye. I gave a small nod. She stood again. "Your Honor, we would also like to submit financial records relating to the Harlow Tower development project." Adrian's company began falling apart before the ruling was even delivered. Word spread through the investor community the way bad news always does, fast, and with details that grew sharper with each retelling. His partners started calling. Banks began reviewing loan terms. 2 institutional investors publicly withdrew from the Harlow Tower project within 48 hours of the courtroom evidence going into the legal record. Adrian went to Vanessa's apartment that evening. Rebecca's source inside the building reported it. Vanessa was packing. She had 2 large bags open on the floor and was moving through her wardrobe with the efficiency of a woman who had always had an exit plan. Adrian accused her of destroying his life. She told him he had managed that himself. She said, "You ruined everything the night you pushed your pregnant wife," and stood there watching. Then she left. Adrian was alone in the apartment where it had all started, standing in a room stripped of everything she had brought into it, surrounded by the wreckage of choices he had convinced himself were clever. 3 days later, Rebecca received a call. Vanessa had collapsed outside the building and been taken to hospital. The following week brought news that changed the shape of everything that remained. Vanessa called Adrian. He came to see her. What she told him, he did not share with anyone. He called me instead. I did not answer. Adrian called 6 times over 2 days. On the 3rd day, he sent a message through his remaining attorney, not Philip Crawley, who had quietly stepped back from the case, asking if I would take a private call. I told Rebecca to ask him to put it in writing. His written message arrived the following morning. He said Vanessa had tested positive for a serious illness. He said he was frightened. He said he needed to know if I was safe. I had been tested regularly throughout my pregnancy and recovery. My results were clear. My doctors had been thorough from the beginning because I had insisted on it. I asked Rebecca to send him one line. "All tests clear. Access ends the night you pushed me." I felt that reading his message was not satisfactory. It was something quieter and sadder than that. The consequence of a double life is not only what it costs the person who built it. It is what it costs everyone standing near them when it falls. Adrian had not understood that. He understood it now. Richard Carter came to my home 2 days later. He had called ahead through Rebecca, and I had agreed to let him come. He stood in my hallway and looked at Grace for a long time without speaking. Then he turned to me and said, "I failed both of you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say it to your face." I believed him. Richard Carter submitted a written statement supporting my legal claims. He confirmed the events as Rebecca had presented them, and he agreed to testify if the criminal fraud investigation went to trial. It was a quiet act, a father dismantling the story his son had built, because the truth had become impossible to keep holding away from the light. Adrian heard about it and drove to my house. Nathan's security team was at the gate. Adrian stood at the end of the driveway and shouted that Nathan had stolen his family. I came to the door. I did not raise my voice. You abandoned it, Adrian, I said. There is a difference. He stood there a moment longer. Then he got back into his car. That was the last time I saw him in person. The criminal investigation into Harlow Tower moved through the following months. 3 former employees cooperated with investigators. 2 investors filed separate civil suits. The company Adrian had spent 8 years building was taken apart by the weight of its own dishonesty. He lost his business license. He lost the house, sold to cover debts. Vanessa gave her own statement to investigators in exchange for a reduced role in the fraud inquiry. She disappeared from his life entirely. But I allowed Adrian's supervised visitation with Grace through the court. Grace deserved to form her own understanding of her father when she was old enough. That was not my decision to make for her. My daughter slept safe and well in a home that was fully mine. The final hearing was brief. The judge reviewed the full record, the accident evidence, the forged documents, the hidden transfers, the false witness Adrian had paid and who had broken down and confessed, the smear campaign, the months of abandonment. Adrian made a final speech. He said he had been confused by emotion. He said he had made mistakes. He said he had loved me once. I stood when the judge asked if I had anything to add. Love did not push me, I said. Love did not leave me blind in a hospital bed. Love did not forge my name on financial documents while I was recovering in another country. Love did not pay a witness to lie in court. I paused. Greed did. Fear did. Selfishness did. Those things have consequences. And I am standing here today as one of them. The courtroom was completely quiet. The judge granted me the divorce, full control of all my assets and investments, primary custody of Grace, and substantial damages tied to the forged documents and the financial losses I had suffered. Adrian's business licenses came under review. I walked out of that courtroom with Rebecca on one side and Nathan on the other. I did not celebrate. I took off my wedding ring, placed it in a small envelope Rebecca was holding, and handed it to her as part of the evidentiary record. Then I went home to my daughter. Years passed the way good years do, quietly and full. My vision continued to improve slowly. It never returned to what it was, but I learned to live in the world as it looked to me now, and found I did not miss the old way of seeing as much as I once feared I would. I built a foundation, the Grace Initiative, for women navigating domestic abuse, financial betrayal, and legal systems not always built with them in mind. We offered legal support, financial literacy workshops, and medical guidance. By the 3rd year, we had helped over 400 women across 6 states. Nathan and I were married in a small ceremony at the end of the 2nd year. No announcements, no large guest list. Just the people who had been present through the real parts of the story. He never once called Grace his stepdaughter. From the day she first reached up and grabbed his hand, she was simply his daughter. Full stop. One morning I read that the Grace Initiative had been recognized at a National Women's Leadership Summit. I set down my phone, walked to Grace's room, and stood in the doorway watching her sleep. Adrian had taken my sight for a season, but I had taken back my name, my daughter, my future, and finally the peace he had tried to convince me I did not deserve. I had not become bitter. I had become free. And that, in the end, was the only revenge that ever truly mattered.